Rabbi Frankfurter of Ami magazine expressed the opinion that Tzoraas that's mentioned in Parshas Tazria and Mitzorah are natural occurrences because the disease called Tzoraas, which is leprosy, which was much more prevalent in ancient times and caused a lot of anxiety in people being uprooted in ancient times. There used to be leper colonies, and even in the modern world, but its roots are in the ancient world. They used to isolate the leper because the leper was so scary. So despite the apparent similarities between the Torah and the ancient disease of leprosy, the question is what is being described in the Torah, is that what leprosy really is? Now we know that there are blotches, there are discolorings, but the description of Tzoraas as they are manifest in the Torah appear to me as unlike what leprosy is about today. We know that people who were leprous could lose their limbs because of the various forms of the disease. Limbs could fall off, limbs could become deformed. The person could lose all function of his body, including his ability to see or hear. But that's not what the Torah describes with the Tzoraas in this week's Parsha. It's a blotch. It's a white blotch that's white as snow, or as white as lamb's wool. This seis and baheres. Baheres is something that's as white as snow. A little bit less than that is called the sapachas, is the whiteness of the temple. The temple was painted white. The altar was painted white. When the altar was painted white, that whiteness was a bright white, but it was not as white as snow, but it was very bright white. It's a lime, and that's a very, very stark white. What is seis? Seis is the color of lamb's wool. A baby lamb born today has such pure white wool that it's very bright white, but it's not as bright as snow. It's a little bit less. And what is the secondary type of whiteness that's similar is an egg white. You look at an egg, you look at the white is very white. That's the white, that's the secondary color. It's the fourth lowest, it's the lowest level of a white blotch that's on the person. That's the size of a dime or a penny. And that this constitutes a leper. If you look online, most of the blotches that are all over a person's body are reddish. And of course, the Torah says if you have something that looks a little bit red, adam dam, but it's not that kind of red. It's a red that's within a white. It's a bright white that has a little bit of redness to it. At any rate, the description that the Torah gives in this week's Parsha is unlike the disease that's commonly called leprosy today. And so I would postulate that, as Rambam says in the Moreh Nevuchim, and he says similar things in the Yad, the Chazokah, in his magnum opus, what is called the Mishnah Torah regarding Tzoraas, that actually Tzoraas is not like the disease Tzoraas, but this was something that was miraculously done, that happened to a person, and at first it would affect his home, maybe his furnishing, although the furnishings are not mentioned in the Torah, but then his clothing, maybe his leather apparel, his leather things, satchels and things like that, leather seats, could have blotches that were bright red or bright green. Same with the house, would have a bright red or bright green growth on it. And that this was considered the tzoras of the home, the tzoras of the beged, and ultimately, if he didn't do tshuva, he would get the tzoras on his body. And it's a recurring theme. The recurring theme is this is all because of loshon hora. 2 parshas in the Torah, very, very difficult parshas. Most of it has to do with evil tongue, slander. And you have to ask yourself, is this all that the Torah is worried about? Aren't there other things other than loshon hora that you have to worry about? I know that girls who go to seminary, who go to the religious high schools, the number one sin that's talked about is loshon hora. At least during my time when I was teaching and comparing notes to other places, the number one concern from the students that I had, and had them in different venues, was they were worried about loshon hora. Is this so central that the Torah would devote so much of its space to just one sin? And of course, those that learn the Sefer Shmiras HaLoshon from the Chafetz Chaim would say yes. Loshon hora is an evil that has to be eradicated, that people have to stop talking badly about each other. But more than just speaking badly about others is the power of speech itself. We have to refine speech. The Torah gave us, God gave us a responsibility to learn Torah, and to learn Torah utilizing our power of speech and repeating the words of the Torah constantly. This is something very difficult for a person even like myself. I like thinking. I don't like saying. But the Alter Rebbe says this in Tanya, by speaking, you actually take a part of your body and the energy of your body and the energy of the food and the drink that you've had all day long, and you make that energy into kedusha, into holiness, by saying the words of Torah. So the speech that we have, if we utilize the speech for good things, we are actually transforming our physical condition into good. If we talk about sports, and most people, if they're not talking about business, they're talking about sports, because that's just the thing that everybody likes to talk about. They like talking about their teams. They like talking about events that are coming up. They're part of things, but these are things that people like to get involved with. They like getting upset with it. They like getting high with it. They like identifying with a team. The root of that is we like identifying with heroes. So instead of having a hero like Moses, we have a hero called Moses Malone or Michael Jordan. Or for us white guys, Larry Bird. Point being that we take our visions and our images of world dominance, of heroes of old, of transforming images, transforming individuals, and instead of taking a hero that stood head and shoulders above the world, or maybe he didn't, he just was a tyrant and controlled a lot of the world, like Mao Zedong, or Joseph Stalin, or Hitler Machshmoy. They were tyrants that controlled much of the world for a large amount of time. Instead of glorifying a tyrant, we glorify a basketball player, or a baseball player, or a football player. And in this way, we take the need of the individual to identify with somebody great or something great, some great leader, and instead of dealing with a political leader, we make a sports leader in his stead. We substitute. By substituting sports for politics, political leaders, we reduce the damage that sometimes is done by poor leadership. That's an idea that people have. Let me get back to the most important thing. The most important thing is we're supposed to use our words for positive things. We use our words for stus, for foolishness, for things that have no value, no lasting value. So the speech has become a channel for nothing. And then we could use the speech for something less than even shtus, even foolishness. We use the speech as a whip, as a weapon to tear other people down. Even in religious circles, speech, even speech that identifies itself as for a righteous cause, can be harmful, not only harmful, destructive and evil. One of my friends growing up in Kfar Chabad was my colleague and friend, Rabbi Daniel Levi. His father, Rabbi Levi, Zechrenu Livracha, was the head of the OK. The OK Laboratories was a very, very important, and is a very important, collection of rabbis who give kashrus on a very, very high standard. I'm not saying it's the highest standard. There are others who also have a high standard. But the OK Laboratories is one of the highest standards, has one of the highest standards of high-level kashrus in the world. And because Rabbi Beryl Levy pointed out that a lot of the kashrus organizations were overlooking certain things, pointed it out to them, they didn't like being upstaged by him. There was a company that used an ingredient, I think it was a type of vinegar, that was kosher for Pesach. And that vinegar had been kosher for Pesach for years and required only superficial supervision because all they had was that type of vinegar. Vayhi Hayom, they decided that they were going to expand or change the way they did business, and they brought in a vinegar that was not kosher for Passover. That vinegar was used in just about every Passover dish, Passover, kosher for Passover item throughout the entire world. And it was under the supervision of Rabbi Berel Levi. When Rabbi Berel Levi found out about it, he was shocked, but publicized this to his own detriment. Publicized that all the items that to date were under his supervision, he could no longer vouch for them because of the change, and therefore, until further notice, they shouldn't use those items which had this particular ingredient until Rabbi Berel Levi ascertained that things were changed for the better and that they went back to the original kosher Passover item. Aha! One of his great competitors pounced on this and began to criticize Rabbi Berel Levi for his indiscretion, for his lack of supervision, that he failed the Orthodox community. And remember, this is the first time in maybe 50 years of serving the community, something this happened with him. And he publicized it. He owned up to it. He didn't cover it up. But the critique was ongoing in magazines, in articles, in editorials, in advertisements. Allusions to Rabbi Berel Levi's failings, despite the fact that he admitted it, and despite the fact that he did everything he could to negate it, despite the fact that he gained nothing from it. That loshon hora, which was true, he hadn't caught it in time before it went out. And the amount of products that it affected was overwhelming, perhaps thousands of products. But the rabbi admitted it and told people long before Pesach, don't rely on these things. And until further notice, don't take any of my hechsher unless I say that they're good. And he actually fixed things. Wasn't good enough. Because the competitors saw an opportunity to belittle him, to demean him, and to get more business from the fact that he had been on a higher standard. Now they could gloat that they were on a higher standard than him, which wasn't true at all. The very next year, that particular hechsher discovered to its shock that a meat source that had been under their hechsher was selling kosher meat using their hechsher, non-kosher meat using their hechsher, right under their noses. This wasn't a rabbinic issue. This was not an issue of tarubas, of things getting mixed up. This was an actual tarfus issue that they had overlooked. Nobody called for the dissolution of that kashrus industry, that kashrus entity. Nobody called people out, the center of that organization, to excoriate them, to rake them over the coals like they did to Rabbi Levi. That embarrassment of Rabbi Levi led to his untimely death. So, is loshon hora an important element? Yes, loshon hora, the ability to speak, instead of speaking holiness, to speak nonsense, and then worse than nonsense. You don't have to speak lies. You can speak the truth, but just embellish the truth, or use the truth to attack somebody else unfairly. Even if it's fair, there's questions whether you're allowed to say it or not. The only time you're allowed to say things bad about a person is privately, when somebody needs the information Otherwise, they're going to be harmed by association with somebody who's harmful, who's toxic. Then you're allowed to talk about the person, the shady dealings that the person does, and so on and so forth. But otherwise, you're not allowed to talk about a person. Gloating about a person's faults, the rabbis say, is tantamount to idolatry, because God covers up the improprieties of other people. A person doesn't have to reveal somebody else's evil unless it's absolutely necessary to save somebody from getting hurt. At any rate, leprosy, according to the rabbis, was caused by loshon hora. But it seems to me it's not just loshon hora. It can't just be loshon hora. Messiah is called a leper. Why is he a leper? Because he knows about everything that harms, that hurts the people of Israel, hurts the Jewish people. He knows every sin that we have. He knows every impropriety. He knows every inconsistency. And he's hurt by that. Because he's hurt by that, his body breaks out into a rash. And he can't stand that another Jew is hurting, that another Jew's got something wrong with him. And that's the real reason why, when we said loshon hora, we had blotches over our faces and over our hands and our arms, because we got involved in the evil of another person. And our bodies are reacting. You shouldn't be involved in it, because looking at something bad about somebody else should hurt you. So you have an allergic reaction. So this gets me to a point where I must say mea culpa. I also am guilty of this. Everybody has a party that they stand for. I'm a Lubavitcher. I stand, and I'm proud of being Lubavitch. There are times when those who are the opponents of Lubavitch get caught with things that are inappropriate. Not the great people, but people who were involved in demeaning Lubavitch. They get found in certain inappropriate positions, let's say. Am I happy about it? No. But does it bother me that something like this exists by Jews? And because that person is a perceived political enemy, doesn't bother me. And that's wrong. Mashiach is going to come only when we are willing to overlook the flaws of the other. It doesn't mean that the flaws aren't there. It doesn't mean that we don't try to correct the flaws if we can. We have to stop enjoying finding fault with others. We have to be pained if somebody else has a flaw. If somebody said something bad about my father or mother, it couldn't even be the truth, my immediate reaction would be to defend their honor, despite the fact that, like other people, they weren't perfect people. But it's my father, my mother. How dare you? The same should be true about somebody else's father, somebody else's mother, somebody else's teacher, somebody else's guidepost, somebody else's luminary. It should bother us when we hear a bad report about somebody else who's not in our ages, not in our way of thinking. It should bother us that something is wrong with somebody else. Somebody else is hurting. Part of this week's Parsha should be not focused on just not saying loshon hora. We should reflect on our ahavas Yisrael. Ahavas Yisrael means you love your fellow like you love yourself. Do you like somebody demeaning you? Somebody examining everything you did? And even if it's true, bringing it about in the worst possible colors, the worst possible light that it could be. Do you like that? Would you like that? Of course not. Just as you don't like being talked about negatively, somebody finds out something about you that's wrong, just as you would be hurt and hope that it would not be reported and publicized, and do everything you can to stop it being publicized. Just as you would do that for yourself, do it for the next guy. Even the guy whom you don't like, even the guy who's been critical of you. Maybe it's time to learn. And I know people will say, you're a fool. I may be a fool, but let me be a fool in this way. I don't want to think bad about anyone in the Jewish people. I don't want to think bad about anyone who opposes me. I don't want to think badly about the people who have hurt me. I don't want to think bad about people who are outside of my ages. I want to think only good about them. I want their reputations to be whole. Maybe I deserve a lot worse for myself, but they don't deserve it. That should be the approach that we should get from Parshas Tazria Mitzora. Let's stop focusing on somebody else's garbage. We have our own garbage. We have our own excrement. We don't need to find it in anybody else. Let's take this seriously. And if we take it seriously and worry about the other person, then the other person will start worrying about you. And maybe we start caring about the other person cares about you, we'll start caring about all of Klal Yisrael. And then we'll have a unified people. And that shouldn't stop us. That shouldn't be the end of it. We should care about the whole world. This is God's world. Did God create our neighbors, our Gentile neighbors? Yes or no? Does God care about them? The answer is yes. What can we do to make it better? Not foolishly, not try to make peace with Hamas. But we should care. We should care about other people, not just about ourselves. Because God cares about the whole world.